Good morning, and thank you very much indeed for that introduction. Fascinating session there, earlier sessions. We are running quite late, so I'm going to get really quickly into this panel, which should be fascinating. Looking at the industrial revolution, yet another industrial revolution that we're going through and its impact on business. I think anyone who doubts that we are living through another of those waves of technological transformation that have defined and changed the economy in the last 300 years or so must have been asleep for the last 18 hours since the NVIDIA results were published yesterday evening. Another extraordinary boost for that company. Of course, it's principally these days making chips for the artificial intelligence revolution. And Jensen Huang, in fact, the CEO of the company, said that we were now, with artificial intelligence, we're at a tipping point. And this, of course, is the topic, the theme that dominates so many discussions, not just in business and industry, but of course increasingly in society and in culture and politics too. But of course the industrial revolution, the industrial transformations that we're seeing go way beyond AI and artificial intelligence. So we want to talk about that, but also get the perspective of these leading figures in industry on the broader technological changes that are taking place. But Vimal Kapur of Honeywell, I'm going to start with you on the inevitable topic of AI. Everybody wants to talk about AI. And we are seeing this extraordinary growth in AI as evidenced, particularly yesterday, by those NVIDIA results. But we've also seen great waves of technological innovation in the past, which have been hailed as great innovative moments that are going to transform productivity in the economy. Sometimes they have, sometimes they haven't. What's your sense of what we're seeing, how important this latest industrial revolution is, and what are the opportunities and challenges that it's presenting?
So I would first say, to your point, that Industry 5.0 is going to be AI++. There are things which have to happen, and there are a lot of technologies. So I just put my Honeywell hat. There are 4 things we are working, which is next generation. I'll talk about AI, but also green molecules to drive sustainability, and other new technologies. We're working actively on urban air mobility. I think we all hate traffic, so there's a solution for that. And quantum computing. All these are going to be, and many others, my colleagues here on the panel are going to talk about it. So next 25 years are going to be different from the last 50 years. To your point on AI, the way I think about it is that when we serve industrial customers, they are looking for more definitive and deterministic solution. It's nice to have your phone and look at what the co-pilot is telling you relative to a summary of your email, and it's nice to know the punchlines, but that doesn't work in an environment which you have to make a decision which is 100% accurate. So we as an industrial company have to think about how to use AI, and really we are thinking about it as this being a solution to solve skill issue, which is most prevalent in industrial world today. We cannot get skilled labor to run operations, to run maintenance, and the technology enables an ordinary person to elevate the skill with the same co-pilot approach. The most advanced, surprisingly, many of people may not know, is really running the plane with a co-pilot, but the co-pilot is not a human sitting next to you, but co-pilot is something which is remote. And really look
at... You're talking about literal co-pilots who will be helping to fly planes.
Right.
AI. Yeah.
Literally the concept of autonomy.
I won't be checking in on that plane anytime soon.
Absolutely. You can fly with me and you'll be safe. So I think it's real. So the industrial world has to think about, my point is the industrial world has to apply it, but with a different context. And really the opportunity here is to solve the skill issue, which is very prevalent in the industry here, and that excites me.
The flip side of the skill issue you say AI is addressing and can address so effectively, and we're already starting to see that, is the labor displacement phenomenon. And again, this has been a problem, or at least a perceived problem, that we've seen with each wave of industrial innovation. There have been estimates I've seen anything from 40 to 60% of jobs that maybe are currently done by humans could be displaced by AI. What's your What's your sense of what the scale of that is, and how much of a concern should it be, or how much of an opportunity is it?
Look, this is no different from earlier changes. Any technology it creates a job displacement. But this time, the difference is it impacts white-collar worker and not blue-collar workers. It means people have to skill up. That's the name of the game. So if you're in software testing, software development, bad news for you, because AI is going to do a lot of that. So we really have to think about a new world in which skills have to be elevated up. And it is going to do some job displacement, but there's no different from 4 or 5 previous technology revolution when the similar thing happened. I remember robotics process automation was a big deal in 2018. We all forgot about it. And that was the same discussion on the same panel. How many jobs is going to displace? How many people remember that now in 2024? Not many people remember it. So it's a journey we all have to go through, embrace the technology, and skill up to the previous set of people to the next level of job.
Gene Berdichevsky, as Vimal says, very much this is not the Industrial Revolution 5.0, whatever you want to call it, is not simply about AI. Indeed, it's way beyond AI. Give us a sense, if you would, about some of the research the scientific research that's being done that's going to transform business and technology in, over a 5 or 10 years' time.
Yeah, look, I would say not only is it not just about AI, Industry 5.0 is going to be mostly not about AI, almost by definition. If we are to invest, as Marcelo said on the previous panel, $4 to $6 trillion a year to transform sustainability, to transform energy over the next couple decades, it's going to have to be grounded in revolutionary science. And we can look at every prior industrial revolution that's come. We're talking about AI, but it's powered by what? It's powered by revolutionary chips based on extreme ultraviolet UV, which is a scientific breakthrough. We look at the electrification of vehicles today based on Nobel Prize science from 20-some years ago before. And so I think we can safely say that whatever the scientific revolutions happening today are what's going to power Industry 5.0 a decade or 2 decades from now. And I think we're going to see that in the next wave of energy storage, like what we work on, which will help us power those, eVTOLs, those autonomous electric aircraft. It'll bring in the second wave of electrification, grid storage, fusion, a lot of scientific breakthroughs at the base of that, and long duration energy storage, just to name a couple of those technologies. So I think if we don't invest massively in scientific research, we're not going to get Industry 5.0. We're just going to do a retread of Industry 4.0.
Do you think that's a problem right now? That, again, because everybody gets very focused on, again, we're all obsessed with AI at the moment, that maybe, again, there are universities around the world, research centers are doing extraordinary research in some of these areas you've talked about. Is that receiving enough attention from both the private and public sector? Do we need to do more?
It's not the fundamentals at the universities. I think we're doing plenty there, but it's how do you actually transition those technologies into industry? And it's not even the early stage venture capital, which is quite vibrant. It's the later stage. How do you actually build these technologies that require billions of dollars of investment? How do you transform them and get those technologies into companies that will ultimately displace companies of the past? And we will have displacement of companies of the past. Again, you don't go through a revolution without breaking some eggs, and I think we're going to have quite a few legacy companies that will make it into the next generation.
Jerry Keefe of HSBC, obviously, following on from what Gene was saying, key to all of these transitions, whether it's AI, the energy transition, some of the advances we're seeing in biotechnology and biomedicine, obviously capital is critical here.
Sure.
From your perspective, from the financial sector, how do you see these transitions working in this industrial revolution, and how the funds and how the investment is being allocated into these various different fields?
Look, I think the point on research and the point on early stage and sort of late stage, fully mature companies that are transforming themselves is a really important one. We invest both in early stage. We have an investment in Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy. We support Saudi Aramco. We work with companies of all sizes and shapes. Now, the thing that I think is underestimated is that a lot of the transformation and a lot of the capability that we rely on to make all of this reality is actually inside of major industrial corporates. And so while the shiny object often is the early stage Series A company that has a new process or molecule or technology that is really important to invest in and that we should be investing in, we will continue to, a lot of the capability to sort of take those molecules and take those processes and take those ideas and drop them inside an organization like a Honeywell that can actually execute is, to me, the sort of mental switch that has not yet flipped, and people don't spend enough time thinking about how to work with industrial leaders and energy leaders who can enable all this.
Is that a policy issue, though, more? Or is that, how much is the private sector here efficiently allocating the resources that are needed here for these various revolutions?
Look, I think the private sector does a reasonable job. We were just talking about this backstage a little bit. I think that early stage capital is a little bit harder to come by given kind of the events of 21 and 22 than it had been, but that's breaking. And I think there'll be a number of there'll be a number of processes that will be catalytic around M&A and around acquisition financing and around capital markets opening back up this year that I think will make everyone feel better about the financing environment, broadly defined. So there's not a huge role for policy to play there. The things that have been done on the policy side, like the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, arguably the most important policy agenda item for the economy since the New Deal. I mean, it's really remarkable the technologies that it's made feasible, the breadth and scope of that sort of policy thrust. For us, it actually turns out to be a more ground level consideration. So thinking about how we actually get grid connectivity, thinking about whether we have actual transmission lines to move the power around that is being created through new modes of generation. Those sorts of things that are very kind of ground level are the kinds of things that need attention. There's enough capital out there and there's a lot of policy thrust.
If I'm going to add to that, I think what we underappreciate is that if we talk specifically to adoption of new technologies, be it batteries, be it new energy sources like hydrogen, economics always win. Yeah. We all want to be good citizens, but in the end, most of the companies are public companies, and their shareholders look for return on investment. And I think we forget the fundamentals, and that's a primary reason we see the adoption of these new technologies slower. So Inflation Reduction Act is good. It supports some of these, but doesn't support everything. But IRA is only in the US. There's no such equivalent enablement in other parts of the world. So I think we underestimate that economics win. So the only way to solve it, either technology makes it cheaper, or some subsidies are done, or tax credits are done. And I think that equation is not being solved holistically. Yeah. We just think the situation will take care of itself, but it is not.
Couldn't agree more. There's the kind of two reasons everyone does something, one that sounds good and the real reason. And I think ultimately, as these technologies kind of emerge and become viable, you're going to find a lot more people participating in things that they once sort of looked at from a distance.
I want to come back and talk about the policy and the economic and the geopolitical environment to some extent in which all this is taking place. But I want to come first to Gerard Barron. By the way, I should say for the first time, we have Jerry, a Gerard, and a Jerry on this panel, and I'm a Gerard too. So I don't think I've ever felt at home quite so much
I have
in all
changed
my life.
name.
Gerard. So do you mind if we call you two Jerry as well?
That's
It
right.
may make things a little bit easier. But Gerard Barron, you've got a particularly interesting perspective on this from your company and what you're doing in terms of the kind of innovation that you're seeing. Tell us a little bit about what you do, and particularly how the metal, how these industrial metals that that we know are in scarce supply and everybody's very focused on, what role you're playing, and in particular the role of developing the production, the extraction of those.
Yeah, look, it seems a bit old world talking about mining at a conference that's going to be so heavily dominated by AI and how that's going to shape our future. But the material basis of our society, if it isn't grown, is mined. And in my hand I have a polymetallic nodule, and we really need to start thinking about where do the future supply of the billions of tons of metals that is forecast that we will need to continue the transition away from fossil fuels, to continue to allow the industrialization in the developing world and population growth. Where are they going to come from with the lightest planetary and human touch? And as AI is going to reinvent industry as we know it, there are other older industries that need reinventing as well. And I agree with Gene that some of those old incumbents that used to do things a certain way just may not be relevant in our future. And of course, if we go back to first principles, it makes sense that we carry out extractive industries in parts of the planet where there is the least life, not the most life. And I'm sure if we had our time again and we decided where would we go mining, we'd go to the ocean, because 70% of our planet is ocean. When it comes to the supply of nickel and cobalt and manganese, more than 70% of the known deposits are in this one area where I take this nodule from. It's in the Pacific Ocean, and it's part of the planet where there is no flora. It's 4,000 meters underwater. There are no communities within 1,000 miles, and we measure the amount of life there in grams per square meter. as opposed to what we're doing today, and that is we're destroying some of our most important ecosystems known as tropical rainforests. And it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. And I think even, I heard His Excellency this morning say that, one of the reasons to go to South America was to highlight protecting rainforests. We need to do that. And of course, we've seen Aramco, great oil company, now start a mining division. So everyone acknowledges we're going to need more metals, but we need to go back to challenge where we're getting them from.
Can you give us a bit of a sense of the economics of that? I mean, how much of the world's demand for these kind of metals can be met by this sort of abyssal, oceanic exploitation? And secondly, what are the economic? I mean, this is, as you said, it's 10,000. I think you told was 10,000 miles out into the middle of the Pacific, and 4,000 meters.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Of course, 1,000 miles out and 4,000 meters. So it's 4,000 meters deep. This must be extraordinarily complex and expensive to exploit, isn't it?
Well, a lot of those technical issues were solved 50 years ago when the industry almost got started. So back in the 1970s, they started to pick up these same rocks in the same area. But the United Nations brought it to an end because 50 years ago, the world hadn't agreed who owns the oceans, where do your borders begin and end. That has now been resolved, thanks to UNCLOS. And so there is a central regulatory body made up of 169 countries who regulate international waters. Now, so that's regulatory certainty, and I think one of the biggest challenges here in America, mining, I think, has a challenging future. No one wants to mine in their backyard. So regulatory certainty is high, but when it comes to economics, it begins with the grade of the material. These rocks literally sit on the ocean floor, like this one in my palm. So we don't have to go and drill and dig, and actually water is a pretty easy thing to get through, compared to on land, where you can spend years drilling holes to get to the ore body underground, whereas we simply have to convert our production vessel, sail it on out there, and we can be in production days later. And one of the great gifts of this resource is that the way we turn these into battery metals is the same way you process rainforest nickel. And that means that we can protect those rainforests by repurposing those processing plants, and they're all in Indonesia or Japan or China, to accept these nodules and turn them into battery metals. And so there's a very strong environmental story here. We're very close to the Indonesian government, who are also committed to getting involved in this industry. And so the economics actually work out such that we'll be in the bottom quartile of the cost curve. And it also helps that the grade of material in this nodule is up to 10 times higher than some of the ore bodies that they're planning to mine on land. And when we process them, we generate no waste and no tailings. Now that's unheard of with mining. Waste and tailings, zero.
Gene, everybody talks a lot about, obviously, the green transition. It's very much the focus of business and governments around the world. You just heard a very interesting example of the opportunities that there might be from Gerard there. But what's the, there has also been a lot of attention paid to the environmental impacts of mining a lot of these critical minerals, metals that are necessary for the development of batteries in particular. Is this, and we've also seen, by the way, significant supply constraints in the field of chips for AI and all this kind of stuff. How much do we need to focus on actually developing supply here? And can we do that in ways that are sustainable and consistent with the goals that the international organizations and governments have laid out?
Yeah, so I think you have to compare the alternatives. And when you look at electric vehicles, the amount of minerals and materials you need to extract from the earth is dramatically less than when you look at the use of fossil fuels for similar needs. And so the question is, how do you do that in the most environmentally friendly way? How do you do it responsibly? And I think there's different debates and discussions on how one goes about it. But fundamentally, if you zoom out and take, let's say, a 30-year view, and assume 2050, all of our vehicles, for example, are powered by batteries, the minerals in the economy at that point no longer need to increase fundamentally. You can recycle the nickel, the copper, the cobalt from the car that you had today to the car that you're going to buy tomorrow. And so I think fundamentally you can get to a dramatically more sustainable place with technologies like batteries as opposed to fossil fuels. And I think ultimately the economics are also going to be much better there, and that's why it'll win. The EVs aren't EVs were sold by the millions well before government policy came to support them because they were better cars for certain consumers. And I think that is the key with all of the technologies that folks are developing, whether it's in fusion, whether it's in hydrogen, whether it's in battery. They have to be better economically, and that is the reason that they will win.
Vimal and Jerry, weigh in here. A lot of the hope, if you like, and we can call it that, a lot of the expectation about addressing these environmental challenges rests on the pace of technological innovation, right? I mean, we know, okay, if we're to meet net zero targets, it's not only about, either incentivizing or disincentivizing fossil fuel production, it's about incentivizing and creating opportunities. Are we on track to achieve those kind of technological breakthroughs that you think in the kind of time frame that we're talking about, where governments want to achieve these targets?
I think to put things in perspective, the energy infrastructure of the world has been created in the last 100 years, and we have to undo that in 25. So I think we have to just remember the pace of doing it. I think what thing I always state is we have to do different is the old business model is not going to work. I cannot be a supplier working with somebody on a contract terms and waiting for things to work. This has to be co-creation, so adoption can only increase if the mutual trust happens and we do things differently. And I think that's not happening at the pace what we need to do. We continue to work in the framework what has been established over the last 50 years, and that definitely needs to change.
Yeah, I think there's a huge range of technologies out there that are complementary to these new kind of demands that we're putting on the world by trying to make this transition as quickly as Vimal describes. I guess if you think about, for example, enhanced oil recovery, which was a carbon capture and utilization technology developed, pioneered, I think, by Saudi Aramco and others to kind of push CO2 down into the ground and then push oil up and extract it. That same technology now, the point capture technology, is being used to take in and sequester CO2 that then is being repurposed into new processes to make sustainable aviation fuel, to use in downstream petchem manufacturing, and otherwise kind of bring this cost curve down by capturing CO2 that is otherwise produced as part of energy or industrial processes in a way that both decarbonizes and also creates economical products.
Okay, final question, and please, again, all weigh in on this. Jerry, you talked earlier about the IRA, the inflation, inaptly named Inflation Reduction Act. Some of us would call it here in the United States, but its importance...
That's an opinion.
It's important. It's certainly... Whatever its effect on inflation, it certainly has been one of the most consequential acts, one of the most consequential measures by any government in the economic field in decades. One of the things, of course, it's done is it has created this, if you like, kind of global competition and adding to, especially with, some people have called it protectionist, but adding to concerns that governments, especially in the current geopolitical environment, with great geopolitical anxiety, uncertainty around the world, companies themselves post-pandemic looking to secure their supply chains, governments again in this geopolitical environment increasingly looking to pursue sort of offshore, nearshoring and reshoring. How much is the geopolitical environment and the deglobalization that some people think we're seeing, how much is that complicating this movement towards the kind of industrial innovation that we've been talking about? Vimal, you go first, and then everybody else very briefly weigh in.
Can we give 30 seconds each? I'm so sorry. Great question, but we have to zoom it through. Thank you, gentlemen.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll give 10 seconds. I think one of the things we can do better is coordinated law formation for new technologies, like data privacy, cybersecurity. Last audit, there are 900 legislation being formed in the planet. So we need probably 5 and not 900. So I think that's clearly an opportunity.
Gene, quickly, you want to weigh in?
Go ahead.
Gerard?
Well, I think you have to play to your strengths, and geopolitics means there's a lot of bashing against some of the political opponents, like China, for example. You go to DC, it's all you hear on the Hill. When actually, America, when it comes to battery metals, should be focused on secondary refining. Like, don't go and throw money after bad ideas when someone else is far more competitive. There's a bigger game to play.
Jerry, last word.
I think the areas of disagreement make great media, but the areas of agreement are actually much broader and create the maximum commercial opportunity.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.